On June 10, 1912, all 8 people inside the Moore family's house in Villisca, Iowa, including 2 adults and 6 children, were murdered by an axe-wielding assailant. The Villisca Axe Murder's house, where an unknown attacker committed one of American history's most disturbing unsolved murders of all time in 1912. At the end of a quiet street in Villisca, Iowa, there sits an old white frame house. Up the street there are a group of churches, and a few blocks away is a park that faces a middle school. The old white house looks like many of the others that fill the neighborhood, but unlike them, it lies abandoned. The house emits no light or sound, and upon closer inspection the doors are found to be tightly boarded up. A small sign out front reads, "Villisca Axe Murder House." Despite its ominous air, this little white house was once filled with life that was harshly stamped out one warm summer's night in 1912. When a mysterious stranger broke in and viciously bludgeoned its 8 sleeping inhabitants to death. The event would come to be known as the Villisca Axe Murders, and it would baffle law enforcement for over a century. On June 10, 1912, the Moore family was sleeping peacefully in their beds. Joe and Sara Moore were asleep upstairs, while their 4 children were resting in a room down the hall. In a guest room on the first floor were 2 girls, the Stillinger sisters, who had come for a sleepover. Shortly after midnight, a stranger entered through the unlocked door, not an uncommon sight in what was considered a small, safe, friendly town, and plucked an oil lamp from a nearby table, rigging it to burn so low it supplied light for barely 1 person. On one hand, the stranger held the lamp, lighting the way through the house. In his other, he held an axe. Ignoring the sleeping girls downstairs, the stranger made his way up the stairs, guided by the lamp and a seemingly unerring knowledge of the home's layout. He crept past the room with the children and into Mr. and Mrs. Moore's bedroom. Then he made his way to the children's room and finally back down to the bedroom. Then, as quickly and silently as he had arrived, the stranger left, taking keys from the home and locking the door behind him. The Villisca Axe Murders may have been quick, but as the world was about to discover, they were unimaginably horrifying. The next morning, the neighbors became suspicious, noticing that the usually rambunctious home was dead quiet. They alerted Joe's brother, who arrived to take a look. What he saw after letting himself in with his own key was enough to make him sick. Everyone in the house was dead, all 8 of them bludgeoned beyond recognition. The police determined that the Moore parents had been murdered first, and with obvious force. The axe that had been used to kill them had been swung so high above the murderer's head that it gouged the ceiling above the bed. Joe alone had been hit with the axe at least 30 times, the faces of both parents as well as the children. The state of the bodies wasn't the most concerning part, however, once the police had searched the home. After murdering the Moores, the killer had apparently set up some kind of ritual. He had covered the Moore parents' heads with sheets and the Moore children's faces with clothing. He then went through each room in the house, covering all of the mirrors and windows with cloths and towels. At some point, he took a 2-pound piece of uncooked bacon from the fridge and placed it in the living room along with a keychain. A bowl of water was found in the home, spirals of blood swirling through it. Police believed that the murderer had washed his hands in it before leaving. By the time the police, the coroner, a minister, and several doctors had thoroughly perused the crime scene, word of the vicious crime had spread, and the crowd outside the home had grown. Officials cautioned the townspeople against going inside, but as soon as the premises was clear, at least 100 townspeople gave in to their gross fascinations and traipsed through the blood-spattered home. One of the townspeople even took a fragment of Joe's skull as a keepsake. As for the perpetrator of the Villisca axe murders, the police had shockingly few leads. A few half-hearted efforts to search the town and surrounding countryside were made, though most officials believed that with the roughly 5-hour head start that the killer had had, he would be long gone. Bloodhounds were brought in, but with no success, as the crime scene had been fully demolished by the townspeople. A few suspects were named over time, though none of them panned out. The first was Frank Jones, a local businessman who had been in competition with Joe Moore. Moore had worked for Jones for 7 years in the farm equipment sales business before leaving and starting his own rival business. There was also a rumor that Joe was having an affair with Jones' daughter-in-law, though the reports were unfounded. The townspeople insist, however, that the Moores and the Joneses harbored a deep hatred for each other, though no one admits it was bad enough to spark murder. The second suspect seemed far more likely and even confessed to the murders, though he later recanted, claiming police brutality. In recent years, the Villisca axe murders house has become a tourist attraction, with visitors even allowed to venture inside. For years, police looked into every possible scenario that could have culminated in the Villisca axe murders. Was it a single attack or part of a larger string of murders? Was it likelier to be a local perpetrator or a traveling killer simply passing through town and taking an opportunity? Please comment your thoughts below.